To close our meditation time together, just about every Sunday, I use the word namaste. Throughout most of India, the word namaste is a simple greeting. It basically is the equivalent of hello. Nama means bow, actually. And if you add the suffixes, as means I, and te means you. So namaste literally means I bow to you. There's a more elaborate meaning of the word, of course, you've probably heard it. It's often said that namaste means the sacred in me respects the sacred in you. It resonates beautifully with our Unitarian Universalist tradition and our sense of respect for the worth and dignity of every person. In some ways, the spark of the sacred is the same in each person. That's certainly how Hindus understand it. In another way, each person is a unique opportunity for the sacred to manifest in a different way. This morning, I want to talk a little bit about how some people fall outside the usual categories and what a gift that is. In fact, each of us, in some way or another, challenges the system of boxes, labels, and expectations that too often define people. One great American model of transcending these categories was Peter Gomes. You may have heard of him. He died in 2011. But for 3 decades before that, he preached to standing room only crowds at Harvard University's chapel. He was chosen by Time magazine as one of the 7 most distinguished preachers in America, and he spoke at the inaugurations of Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Now, more than any of these accomplishments, though, Gomes stands out as a study in contradictions. He navigated his own path outside of the limits of a single identity. Breaking expectations really started before he was even born. His mother was a graduate of the New England Conservatory of Music and was from one of Boston's most established black families. But she fell in love with the most unlikely of men while she was out driving in the country. She met an immigrant from Cape Verde in the islands off of Africa. He was a laborer there that worked in the cranberry bogs. He was an only child, so he had all the attention and educational opportunities you can imagine. He grew up as a curious, bright, black child in a nearly all-white community of Plymouth, Massachusetts. With a Baptist minister as a grandfather, he used to practice preaching as a young kid and gave his first sermon at the age of 12. And he intended to be a museum curator, but his professors insisted that he go to Harvard Divinity School. After school, he took a teaching position at Tuskegee Institute. It's a historically black college in Alabama. Heading to the South was quite an adventure. In an interview, he said, "I saw more black people in my first half hour at Tuskegee than I had seen in my entire life. And I was the strangest Negro they had ever seen because I didn't talk or dress like them." In 1970, 2 years later, he was invited back to Harvard to take a teaching position there and to head up the chapel. That's where the most significant of these contradictions arose. In 1991, after a conservative student magazine devoted an entire issue to attacking gays, Peter came out as a gay Baptist minister. Peter Gomes was a black Republican, a Baptist preacher at Harvard, a stronghold of secularism. He had the commanding baritone voice of a Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King with the flowing accent of a Yankee blue blood. In every way available, he transcended categories and defied expectations just by being himself. Closer to home, I've had the privilege of knowing someone who transcends categories in a very different way. It's someone that I know pretty well, actually. I'm hanging out tonight with them. 3 years ago, I was invited to perform the wedding for these two. It's my good friend and his spouse. I've done a lot of weddings and memorials, but it's rare to get to do a wedding for a couple that you've seen develop from the very beginning. I had time to witness the relationship and how my friend sort of blossomed in the whole experience. 3 years ago, I presided at their wedding. This year, Matt came to the realization that neither category of male nor female fully fits. Matt's gender non-binary or gender queer. Matt has thrown away the rule book for fashion and shops for whatever looks and feels good, including pants, high heels, polo shirts, lipstick, and whatever else looks fun. Instead of the masculine pronouns he, him, his, Matt asks people to use the pronouns they, them, and theirs. It takes some practice getting used to. I had to pay serious attention while writing this sermon, and I already messed it up. I'm slowly getting used to it as I hear my good friend talk about his spouse with gender-neutral pronouns. Like so many other pieces of using language, using they, them, and theirs as singular pronouns just takes some practice. More important than the pronouns is the fact that Matt is happier and their relationships are thriving. We all do better in relationships when we're happier and more connected with who we truly are, right? It's been a minor shift in the marriage. The much bigger improvement came at work. Matt's boss, in an effort to be inclusive, had tried very hard to treat Matt as just one of the guys. Yeah, even when Matt was male identified, they were never just one of the guys. Matt has always been pretty feminine, even as a man. So when Matt came out at work as being gender non-binary, their boss had a pretty major shift. Their boss was no longer compelled to treat Matt the way he treated other men. He was able to treat Matt as Matt. Apparently, it dramatically improved the work environment. I wanted to tell you about Matt and Peter Gomes for a few different reasons. First is to lift up the power of being one's self. We also heard a little bit from Celia in her opening remarks. She's learned to fully embrace all of her background and culture. No longer compelled to conform to a single national culture, she's able to fully express her unique perspective on the world. Similarly, Matt's thriving professionally through having genuine relationships rather than being just one of the guys. And Peter Gomes, he became an institution in American religion by speaking from the middle ground. It's not easy, but coming to terms with a full, complicated identity can be incredibly fruitful. And being their full selves, spilling outside of the boxes and going beyond expectations helps all of us become aware of our own assumptions. Fortunately, we're seeing more diverse representations of people of color on television. Slowly but surely, the stories and voices of diverse Asian people are rising to join the rich mixture of stories of Black and biracial people. Every time we hear a voice or story that doesn't match what we expect to come out of that face, our world gets bigger. The expansion of our world, the broadening of what we assume is possible, is no small gift. It's something to be treasured. Slowly, we're also learning from people who live between male and female. As we do, we're invited to think about the limits we put on our own selves, the limits we put on ourselves by checking one of two boxes. If they don't feel constrained by fashion or gender expectations, why do we? I wanted to tell these stories also to invite you to see and appreciate the pieces of yourself that bust open expectations. Maybe you're not a Black Republican Baptist preacher at a liberal university. Maybe you aren't genderqueer, but I bet there are some pieces of your identity that are unexpected. Maybe it's gender. Maybe you're a woman who built a career in a male-dominated field. Or maybe as a man, you've taken a larger than usual role in caring for children. Celia talked about the experience of being an immigrant, both Chinese and American in her culture. She's not the only tapestry member that straddles two different continents and cultures. Your straddling different cultures, I imagine, is exhausting and challenging. It's also a beautiful, complex gift to our world. Your experience brings new perspectives. Or perhaps your family constellation falls outside of the norm. Maybe adopted kids, or mixed families, or single by choice. I haven't paid that close attention, but there are probably some relationships with significant age gaps in the congregation. Each of those arrangements invites an opportunity for learning. It's not easy, but the challenge of loving in unconventional arrangements brings new possibilities into the world. This week, I was thinking about these labels and boxes that describe people, and I tried to understand my own desire to blow those boxes to pieces. I'm not a radical person. I'm not inclined to reject ideas or traditions just for the sake of it, but something compels me to challenge the boxes of Black or white or Asian, male or female, boxes of wealthy or middle class, conservative or liberal. And I realized that usually when we use these categories, they almost immediately create an ideal by which we measure the person inside. These aren't just types of people. Each type has an ideal by which we measure the individual. The question isn't, is this a woman or a man? The question is, how well do they adhere to the ideal? Is he a real man? Is she pretty, caring, and demure enough? Are you Black enough? Are you a pious enough Christian? Are you the type of gay that we see on Will and Grace? Are you a crazy rich Asian? Are you white like the Joneses with a middle-class income, 2 kids, and a minivan? When we put someone in a category, often we simultaneously measure their success at achieving an ideal within that type of person. Maybe one way to avoid measuring a person's worth in such arbitrary ways is to avoid putting them in a box to begin with. Maybe blowing up boxes is a step toward our universalist faith. I want to leave you all today with a reminder of our foundation in universalism. I often hear the word misunderstood as a sort of universal, overarching faith. And I understand where that confusion comes from, but that is not universalism. Universalism is actually about the broadness of God's love. It's about the broadness of human worth. Universalism teaches that no matter what you do or who you are worthy of love. No matter what category you fit into or spill out of, you're worthy. There's a great big world of possibilities out there beyond yes and no, good and bad, male and female, black and white, American and other. There's a great big beautiful world that is available if we have the courage to live beyond categories and to appreciate one another as the unique blessings that we are. Amen.